Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for making it tonight to our CSU Spur series. We are so excited that we could put on these programs for you all at home or wherever you are viewing from. While I am speaking, please just put in the comments where you're watching from, and if you are an alum, please just write in the year that you graduated as well. We always like to know where our alums are streaming from and where they're watching. Another thing too that I really want to thank is our Alumni Association members that are streaming in today as well. Without you, we would not be able to put on events like this or work with our amazing partners that are here tonight, as well as our wonderful speakers that are here tonight as well. So thank you so much for your membership. If you have any questions about becoming a member, I will post some information into the chat in just a few moments. I will also put other information in there about like my information. So if you're having any troubleshooting issues, you can email me or give me a quick call and we can help you make sure that you're hearing everything that is going on. As I said before, this is a series. Feel free to check out all of our other events that are going on virtually or hybrid events that we are doing. We have tons of events that we've done in the past couple of years that we all have on YouTube. So please feel free to check out the YouTube channel. I will post that in the comments in just a few moments as well. And like I said too, that this is part of a series. So we have all of our recorded videos from 2020 and 2021, where we've been highlighting things that are going on at Spur, as well as what's going to be happening at Spur. While we are doing a presentation, please feel free to type any questions into the comment section. We will hold all of those questions until the end. We are going to answer as many questions as we possibly can. If we go a little bit over time and you feel like you can't stay on anymore, do not worry. This event is being recorded and this will be put right onto our YouTube channel as well. So feel free to check all of that out at a later date if you have to leave. Again, thank you so much for making it tonight. On that note, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pass this off to Dr. Alan Rudolph, who will be facilitating all of the speakers as well as the questions tonight. Dr. Alan Rudolph is the Vice President, the Vice President for Research at Colorado State University. He's a wonderful guy. It's such a great person to work with. Dr. Alan Rudolph, I will let you take it away.
Thanks, Corey. Really excited to be here and glad that you joined us tonight. We really have a special event that I know you'll enjoy and you'll be talking about well after it's over. The title is on the research on the biggest issues of our times. And as you know, our research enterprise has been thriving. We've broke records 2 years in a row. We were a top 10 recognized international school for students interested in coming to a place where COVID research is done. And as a land-grant institution in the West, we lead many topics in research, and you're going to hear from some of the great thought leaders tonight on our campuses. And in the three areas that we're going to be discussing tonight, there are no bigger research challenges than in the areas of water, agriculture, and in energy. And we've got three great speakers tonight that we'll hear from briefly and then bring them back to ask them questions about their research and how it relates to Spur campus, how it relates to the impacts made across the system and at the buildings that'll be opening up shortly at Spur that we're all excited about. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce the first speaker and then he'll come, when he's finished, I'll come back and introduce the next one and our third one. And it's a real pleasure to start with one of the great leaders on our campus around the field of water, Dr. Mazdak Arabi. He's a good friend and colleague as well. And Mazdak has been really leading this area as the Borland Endowed Professor of Water Resources in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering in the Walter Scott College of Engineering. Mazdak really brings an international perspective and has a national reputation in the work that he's done, leading through the National Science Foundation the creation of an open source software system called eRAMS that he's going to tell you about but it really approaches water in a very unique way, thinking in a very integrated fashion. And as we know in the West, there is no more precious commodity and issue in research in our future than water. So without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Mazdak Arabi.
Thank you very much, Alan. I really appreciate the introduction. Hello, everybody. This is Mazdak Arabi. I am with Civil and Environmental Engineering, and my research primarily focuses on water resource management and infrastructure that relates to water and linked systems. So, Corey, I don't see my slides. I don't know if you still have them or do you want me to share them again?
I don't know why your screen went black. Maybe try sharing it again.
Okay, sorry for this.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Corey. As Dr. Rudolph mentioned, water is arguably the most precious resource that we have, not only in the West, but across the country and globally. And in the American West in particular, we deal with many challenges regarding sustainable management of this really precious resource, which is fully allocated in water in river basins across the American West. Every drop of water almost has an owner, and water is used and reused several times in our river basins. And management of water in the American West is challenged by very fast population growth in many regions that we have limited water resources, rapid urbanization, people moving to cities, and increasing demand for water in cities, and subsequently transfer of water from agricultural water users to municipal water users. And of course, climate change and extreme events, intensification of extreme events such as extended droughts have put extensive and severe pressures on our water resources. For example, the South Platte River Basin, which encompasses the Front Range of Colorado, has experienced very rapid growth of our population. Almost our population will be doubled by 2050 compared to early 2000s. And warming temperatures in our region is evident, very similar to other regions throughout the world. A very unique situation in the South Platte River Basin and the Front Range of Colorado is that our water systems originate in the headwaters in the Rocky Mountains, where we have pristine water systems, and forest fires, increased pollution in our headwater systems have created some challenges for not only our drinking water systems, but also receiving waters, rivers, and lakes. And as the South Platte River runs through our cities and agricultural ecosystems, the quantity and quality of water gets to be influenced by these human activities and also other natural conditions. Of course, in the Front Range of Colorado, we also import water from the western slopes. This creates a very unique social and political and economic conditions that need to be incorporated in our water resource planning and management. So if you think about the Front Range of Colorado and how our population is growing and how most of the population is moving to cities in urban regions, and you can see that over the course of the 21st century, in excess of 90% of residents of Front Range will be in cities and urban areas. This creates tremendous challenges for not only managing our water systems, but also land, competition for land and energy systems that other speakers today will also address as they talk about these situations. Some of the analysis that we've done regarding this urbanization and population growth in Front Range of Colorado as one example of changing circumstances in the American West indicates that although we can see communities bubbling up across our region, nearly 40 to 45% of homes in the Front Range of Colorado that are needed to host the residents by 2050 have not been built yet. And as we think about reinventing our infrastructure systems, making our cities, our river basins more sustainable and more resilient to changes in climate and other extreme events, it's really important to think about how we can reinvent our water, energy, and other infrastructure systems that we put in place. Some of the concepts that are emerging and are investigated at Colorado State University and other partner universities and institutions focus on resource recovery and recycling, meaning creating systems that are regenerative. We don't produce waste, but when we do produce waste, we try to recover resources and reuse them, and water is included in that closed economy or in that closed loop type of regenerative system. We want to obviously increase our resilience to extended droughts, to flooding circumstances and other extreme events, also changes in our economy, which perhaps stress our infrastructure systems. And ultimately, the goal is to make our communities more livable. So among the solutions and infrastructure systems that are proposed and being investigated and implemented across the Front Range of Colorado, throughout the American West and throughout the country, are resource recovery and reuse type of systems, green infrastructure systems, and other type of distributed, decentralized systems that add resiliency and modularity to our systems. So the Spur campus in Denver is a very unique opportunity for our research. The reason for that is that the Spur building, the water building at this Spur campus allows us to bring 6 unique sources of water from different sources to the building. These include wastewater, stormwater, gray water, roof runoff, raw water, and potable water, which range in the quality of the water that we use. And then this water is planned to be used for various purposes, for different types of uses, from landscape irrigation, use for cooling towers, other industrial uses, indoor residential uses such as toilet flushing or perhaps laundry. Urban agriculture is one of the major uses that we're going to investigate at the campus. And obviously, treating water to potable standards is another use of water. So at the Spur campus, we are planning and designing and hopefully implementing pretty soon a one water technology accelerator platform. And by one water, again, we are referring to systems that foster regeneration of resources, resource recovery and reuse, green infrastructure, and this type of systems, and demonstrate fit for purpose treatment, sensing technologies that are innovated, and research that enables implementation of the sensing technologies to link sources of water and the quality of receiving water with uses of water and the quality that is needed for those designated uses. And of course, when we think about application of this type of technologies from building scale to municipal and city and regional scales, we need software solutions that would allow us to develop computational capacities and then use them for river scale type of applications. So at the Spur campus, we have this very unique opportunity that we're building this actual physical infrastructure for fit for purpose water use for various purposes, developing sensing technologies, and also we focus on developing software solutions such as the ERAMS technology that Dr. Rudolph mentioned. So here's a schematic of the building. You can see that in this diagram that we have gray water reuse for various purposes, from toilet flushing, and Dr. Buslow will talk about green roofs in the building that potentially could be one of the applications or uses of the gray water systems that we have here. We obviously are putting systems in place to capture stormwater or rainwater and then use this water for various purposes. And then we have storage capacities that wastewater with different levels of quality are brought to the campus. And then we investigate what type of treatment technologies are needed to be able to use the water for, let's say, again, urban agriculture, toilet flushing, and different types of uses. So we are extremely excited about this opportunity down in Denver. This expands our physical infrastructure that would enable our research to really develop technologies that make a difference in the world. Right now, many of the technologies that we develop need piloting and demonstration opportunities, and this campus is an excellent opportunity for those situations. So in summary, water technologies require further research and demonstration that will be enabled at the Spur campus. We also are thinking about commercialization and marketing of some of the research that we do. So building an innovation ecosystem that allows us to take our research and partner with industrial and governmental partners to scale up these technologies. And some of these concepts that we are developing will be implemented at the Spur campus, but also some other locations that we are partnering to develop those piloting locations. And eventually, the water technology accelerator at the Spur campus will serve as a very unique platform that enable us to, again, build that innovation ecosystem, a very unique place that companies, private sector or other third-party companies can demonstrate their technologies in this context as well.
Mazdak, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you too much.
Sure.
Are you forwarding on your slides?
Yes.
Okay. It's not doing it on the screen. Do you mind trying? Oh, there we go. Now it's at. Thank you. Can you go back a couple?
Yeah. No,
people really want to see that building. Yeah.
Yeah, here. So I'll just go over the slides again very quickly, showing that again how we are going to urban regions. And here's the schematic of fit-for-purpose use of water from various sources to various uses, and then the Spur campus that Corey, you perhaps were referring to. So with that, I'm going to stop here, and I would be more than glad to answer any questions or comments that are provided at the end of our presentations.
Thank you, Mazdak. Yeah, sorry about this, but it's great you had the building slide up there at the end so people can see what's being planned. That's really exciting. Thanks.
Sure.
We'll move on, and the next speaker is Dr. Jennifer Buslow, who's an assistant professor in the Department of Horticulture and Landscape Architecture in the College of Agricultural Sciences at CSU. And she really has been focused on rooftop agriculture and urban agriculture and integration of green roofs into our world, urban worlds, and really has been a leader in this and will introduce probably many of you to a word you haven't heard before called agrivoltaics. And she really has been a leader in the nation around this. She's an editor in charge of the only academic journal related to green roof research in North America. And we're really excited that she's here tonight. So Dr. Jennifer Buslow.
Thank you so much, Alan. I really appreciate it. I'm delighted to talk to you all. I'm an alum of Colorado State University, just like you. And I'm delighted to talk about my greatest professional passion, which is green roofs. So here's a picture of a famous green roof, at least famous in Colorado. It is the Mordecai Children's Garden at the Denver Botanic Gardens. And one of my graduate students is working on collecting data there that I'll tell you a little bit about. My journey with green roofs started while I was a PhD student at Colorado State University. Here I am collecting data on the EPA Region 8 headquarters in downtown Denver. So this picture was taken about 15 years ago, and we were looking at species survivability and substrate blends, including the interaction with the solar panels that the green roof had that are behind me. So if you're not familiar with that building, it's right beside Union Station in downtown Denver. I always like to start with a little bit of a rationale. People might think, why in the world would we put plants on top of a building? Well, Mazdak did already mention one of the benefits, but essentially the rationale behind vegetating these urban spaces comes because as urbanization consumes more land, impervious surfaces also increase. So all of a sudden, as a society, we have to deal with a bunch of issues that we didn't have to deal with when we were in dispersed and rural locations only. So things like the need to manage stormwater, the urban heat island effect. Using Denver as an example, Denver is one of the worst in North America as far as the urban heat island effect. It's about 10 degrees warmer in summer in the urban area than it is in the surrounding rural area. And things like loss of arable land. Of course, we have all kinds of open space and land available in Colorado, but not everywhere in the world has space on the ground to be able to perform agricultural functions. So how do you mitigate those things? Really, ideally, it's increasing vegetation. And so that's why I'm so interested in using one element of vegetation in urban spaces, which is green roofs. So here's another nice quote that I like. Urban spaces are pivotal nodes of the global ecosystem. And it is in cities where the majority of humans and influential decision makers experience nature. That's why it's important to bring nature and agriculture into our cities, because that's where by mid-century, approximately 2/3 of our world population will live. So I also reference this in my TED Talk. I have a TED Talk on the topic of rooftop agrivoltaics, which I will get to next. So my primary research that will be located at the CSU Spur campus is going to include multiple areas. The first one is stormwater capture. So I'm not a stormwater scientist. I can lean on Mazdak and Sybil in the engineering college to help me summarize that aspect of it, but essentially how we can use green roofs to capture the stormwater that lands on top of buildings. So the hydro building, which is the bottom image, is where that research is going to be located. I'm also going to do research on plants and pollinators. So the first picture I showed at the Denver Botanic Gardens is where we initiated that research. We looked at native plants and their flowering timing and how that influences the relative success of pollinators. We're also going to look at irrigation. That's a major factor and something when I helped out on the Denver Green Building Ordinance and advising on that. That was what Denver Water was worried about. If we're going to install a whole bunch of green roofs in Denver, are we going to increase our potable water use? And thankfully, the short answer is no, not really, because we focus on very drought tolerant and predominantly native green roofs in our area. And of course, food production. And the food production element I'm most interested in is incorporating solar panels into food production. And so that's what we call rooftop agrivoltaics. So that is the topic of the TED Talk that I mentioned. You can find on YouTube or on TED.com. So here's a picture of what rooftop agrivoltaics looks like. Here's a 150 square meter simulated green roof system I installed under some existing solar panels earlier this year to evaluate the relative success of growing vegetable crops under solar panels. In this case, you see semi-transparent solar panels, which is absolutely exciting to a scientist like me who's interested in getting the plant available light through the solar panels so we can not only grow our vegetables, but also harness some energy there. And that's my presentation on green roofs at Spur campus.
Well, there we go. Thank you. That was great. And you ended really well with a good segue to the energy behind rooftop greenery And again, it's my pleasure to introduce our third speaker. And please hold your questions or put them in the comments, and we'll get to a Q&A after our third speaker. Our third speaker is in the area of systems energy integration, and Dr. Jim Kale is an associate professor at CSU in the Systems Engineering Department with joint appointments in the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department, again in the Walter Scott College of Engineering. And his research really is on energy conversion, energy integration, especially in the built environment. And Dr. Kale also represents the ecosystem that Mazdak referred to. We'll talk more about at the Spur campus. But prior to joining CSU, Jim led the Integrated Energy Group at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado, which, if you read the paper, the Denver Post this morning, President Biden visited that lab today, as well as the Secretary of DOE. So Dr. Kale came to us from a national lab focused on energy and integrated energy systems. And Dr. Kale, glad you joined us tonight.
Yes, thank you. It's an honor to be here this evening and to follow such groundbreaking research. Let me just check that my slides are advancing okay here. Does that work? Okay. So again, Jim Kale, and today what I want to tell you about is some ongoing research at CSU that's now being done, at least proposed in partnership with Spur, various faculty members that are connected to Spur and partners. And that subject is next generation grid interactive efficient buildings, or GEBs. What I want to tell you about tonight is really from the electrical perspective and energy systems perspective, research towards efficient and connected energy districts and ideas that we hope to bring to the innovative campus at Spur and the surrounding areas. Now, what I'll talk about today is really part of a big DOE proposal. I was hoping to actually say, to tell you some details about that tonight, which I can't because we don't have the decision yet, but I will tell you about the research and sort of allude to what we have planned at Spur. And to sort of kick that off, one of the things that we've been working on as part of a big DOE project, it's been going on for several years here, is just looking at modern buildings and whether or not we're using energy efficiently in those. I think everyone is familiar with the well-known historical rivalry between Edison and Tesla. Edison wanted DC, Tesla wanted AC, and for various reasons, AC won out. So the grid itself has been AC-centric for about 150 years, but the situation looks a lot different today. This is just a notional diagram of a grid, or the distribution inside of a building. So one piece of a grid, which could be multiple buildings connected together here. But inside each of these buildings, a lot of the load is actually DC now, as you know, computers, LED lighting, phones, and other things. So the question is this still the best option for distributing energy inside buildings? So just to lay the groundwork here, if you look at the sources I have down here, what's been found recently is that around 50% of the loads, the electrical loads inside buildings, is made up of MELs, which are miscellaneous energy loads, and lighting. Other things, the traditional loads are still there, but if you look at this circle here, 80% of electricity is expected to flow through some type of power electronic converter by 2030. Each time you do those conversions here between AC and DC, you lose on average about 14%. So we've done characterization of various devices at CSU to back up this data. And then at the same time, we've talked about PV here. There's been an explosive growth, as you know, in PV. So begs the question, if the PV or storage or other types of devices are natively DC, should we be running buildings on DC? So we've done some work at CSU and built up various software to evaluate how you should manage energy in a building. Should it be AC or DC? And this is kind of the flow here. We did extensive hardware validation and testing of typical loads you would see in a modern building, LEDs, power supplies, et cetera, developed high fidelity models of those, and then using electrical network theory, two-port network models, we built software. It's open source software, and it's meant to to be compatible with various DOE building modeling tools that have been used. And this is pretty much fresh off the press here. I'll show some software that's now available. But what we'd like to do at Spur and these new innovative buildings is to use this new toolkit that we've developed. It's called BEAM, or the Building Energy Efficiency Analysis Modeling Toolkit, with Energy Plus. Energy Plus, as you may know, allows you to take design information from a building, and then we're now connecting that to our new model. And the idea that we're working on now is co-simulation. So as these various loads heat up, they heat the surrounding area, the air, and from the building models that, there's a thermal inertia associated with that. So the ability to co-simulate will then allow us to do more effective use of energy. And Grid Interactive Efficient Buildings, GEBs, the next step towards this research is to use a tool called UrbanOPT, which was developed or funded by DOE and developed primarily at NREL, in combination with BEAM, to be able to model community energy resource sharing, to maximize energy flexibility and efficiency and lower the overall cost of energy. The other aspect to this is that if these buildings are effectively, they can supply their own energy resources, then they can also be sort of an island of power, a microgrid. And in that case, they could be used to help the local community in case of, say, emergency. These buildings could be evacuation centers, for instance. So just a couple of final thoughts here. There is research going on right now with CSU and partners to develop more efficient design and resource management in the built environment, looking at buildings as something totally different, rather than static loads, highly grid interactive buildings, rather than just resource islands, to allow sharing of energy between communities and energy districts. So that's a key enabling technology. And I also mentioned the resiliency aspect as well. Last note here is, as I said, we have a big government DOE proposal in on connected communities with CSU Spur partners in the government and national labs. I hope to have good news on that soon. And that's all that I had.
That's great. Thanks, Dr. Kale. And as Dr. Kale referred to a proposal that's pending, our office is responsible for setting up the administrative operating functions of research at Spur in collaboration with Spur. So we'll be facilitating grant getting and some of the research that goes on there that CSU Fort Collins oversees for this campus, but we'll be overseeing for Spur. So we look forward to that successful award as well, Dr. Kale. At this point, I'd invite Corey to put all of our speakers on back into the studio, and we'll attempt to have a little conversation while you add your comments or questions perhaps to the chat, and Corey will feed them to us as well. And we'll keep rolling, encouraging you to get involved, but we'll roll here and have some dialogue. And I might start with a question to the three of you about the engagement at Spur. Research is something that we often do in laboratories, we do in specialized facilities. What's so unusual about the Spur campus will be the opportunity to engage with the public. And, that brings up opportunities for learning for people who are coming through. Also, perhaps in what we know as citizen science or other ways in which our partners might engage with the Spur campus. So maybe I'd start with that and ask each of you to talk about how you think about your research now in a new environment at Spur campus that's really focused on engaging partners, engaging the community. And I might have a follow-up question about that, but maybe we'll start there and see who wants to go first on that.
Before we go to, just FYI, I know that there is an Ask a Question section under the StreamYard area. Don't utilize that one. Utilize the comments section, just so that I can see that one, because the Ask a Question is not sending them to me right now.
Okay. Thanks, Corey. So engagement at Spur, how do you see it influencing your research, and how do you think about the more interactive nature of what the Spur campus offers. Maybe, Jim, I'll ask you to go first since you were the last speaker, and we'll go around and see what we can do.
Yeah, well, I think the opportunity at Spur, at least the way that I see it, and when I see the other research that was presented, it just solidifies it in my mind. Where there are a lot of things that we can do sort of in a controlled laboratory environment, maybe on main campus, but I see the promise of Spur being the ability to have a living laboratory, as it were. So you have all of these new technologies that are being developed, the rooftop PV, the rooftop gardens, et cetera. EV charging stations are being planned, things like that. So I see it as a way to engage with the public to show, new technologies are being developed. It's actually having a direct energy impact locally. I also see that there could be an opportunity for education and even skills building. There could be say courses, maybe hands-on courses that are given near the campus where students can come in and actually install a PV inverter or some other type of technology. So that living laboratory concept is what I'm most excited about.
Great.
So I agree.
Go ahead.
So I agree. The living laboratory part is an incredible option. In fact, I hope to have tours going right through all of my research areas because I want to help get the word out. And so that's a very exciting option. I'd also love to do some internships with local high school students or college students and to get them even more involved in the green roof research. And just like Jim mentioned a few minutes ago, actually the hands-on aspect is really incredible. I want to mention we have a partnership with Bruce Randolph School, which is just a couple of miles away from CSU Spur campus, where we're doing offering dual credit for one of the courses I teach called Hort 100 Horticultural Science. And so the students are benefiting directly from CSU being local.
Mazdak, do you have you want to chime in?
Sure. I would add a couple of things that we are considering in terms of broader interactions and engagement. One is topics focusing on social, environmental, and economic justice. As we know, in cities, we often have pockets of populations and communities that do not have access to green spaces, blue spaces. Some of these co-benefits, we call them co-benefits of green infrastructure systems, such as, again, improved air quality, less urban heat, this concept of urban heat islands that we are hearing more and more about in many cities in the American West, from Phoenix to Las Vegas, and even in the East Coast now we are experiencing very extreme heat conditions in cities. So we're one of the specific community-focused issues that we will be conducting research on is focus on social environmental justice issues, how green infrastructure improves community health and well-being, in addition to providing, obviously, additional and alternative water sources. The second topic is that by building this One Water Accelerator platform, we're hoping to have a place that serve as an educational component as well, so people can actually come see how these technologies work. And as I mentioned, the exciting opportunity at Spur, for us at least, is building research, but having an innovation ecosystem that allows us to interact with broader community, whether we're talking about citizens, general members of the community, or maybe opportunities focused on marketing and commercializations and things of that sort. So these are the two specific items that we will immediately embark upon as we get engaged at the Spur campus.
Yeah, thanks, Mazdak. And maybe I'd pull the thread on your answer there a little bit more about social justice and equity, because if you flip it and you sort of say that the Spur campuses offer that access, what you're really doing is, bringing science to the public or innovation to the public and that introduces behavior, right? And so I'm curious to talk more about that. I mean, it's clear we're in a pandemic and we're having a lot of debate in our society about behaviors, mask wearing, should I vaccinate, should I not vaccinate? And in each of your areas, the behavioral element of what you seek is important, right? So Jim, I'd love you to talk a little bit about how people's behavior in a building affects energy. Or Jen, you're growing a food on a rooftop. You know, people treat GMO foods quite differently. How will they treat foods grown on the top of a roof in a city? And Mazdak, in your case, converting gray water or having water conversion, people, you know, also behaviorally react to water. So I'm curious, you know, if you take what you said, Mazdak, and you agree, I think we all agree, Spur is a great opportunity for access to innovation. Can you talk, each of you in your own areas, how behaviors of people affect the system that you're working on? Maybe we'll start with Jen this time.
Great, sounds good. Well, it's sort of an easy answer. Thanks for asking it. It really comes down to food security, and it allows people, when we can grow our own food in our urban spaces, right where we live, even if it's on the rooftop of our apartment building, that really helps us with food security and being able to contribute in a way that actually can make an economic impact on the household. And so having that right there, you know, this cutting edge research right there in Denver is an incredible opportunity.
Great. Mazdak?
Alan, you just tackled a very, very important issue. Many of the water challenges in our region, whether it's Front Range of Colorado or American West, are not necessarily technological issues. We are increasingly capable of creating new solutions and technology and infrastructure systems that can help address issues around climate change or, you know, changes in our economy or population. But the social and behavioral and economic considerations often are as important, if not more important. If you think about, you know, household behavior all the way to policymaker behavior, everything is important in this concept of decentralized or alternative water uses. You mentioned gray water, but also wastewater reuse for whether it's toilet flushing all over to potable uses often are impeded by people's understanding or perception of risks. So a lot of the work that Dr. Charvel, as you know, and others at CSU and our partners are doing are focused on understanding not only the quality of the water for different uses, but also educating the policymakers regarding what type of regulations we need, what type of standards we need. And then it gets to things like plumbing codes and things of that sort. So I think social and behavioral aspects of water use, and hopefully some of the things that we will be investigating at the Spur campus, cannot be underestimated in terms of creating new solutions as we go forward.
Yeah, thanks. And Jim, your area, I know UrbanOPT was a program, you know, that optimizes building energy, and I'm curious what you've learned or know about the behavior of people inside that building and how the technologies you're developing might be influenced there.
Sure. Of course, the demand side from the electrical energy perspective is really important, and the intersection between behavioral science and energy management is probably not as explored as it should be. But the initial studies suggest that, you know, it's important to make sure that behavioral, let's say, changes are included in the overall energy plan. To give you one, I thought interesting example. This was on something that they did when I was at NREL. They had a little pop-up where if people became uncomfortable on temperature, they would say, you know, I'm uncomfortable. And everyone thought that maybe naturally you would want it at, I don't know, 69, 70. I like frost on the windows myself, but nonetheless, they kept raising it up, and they found that people know that they're okay up to, you know, 71, 72 Fahrenheit. And that has a huge impact. So there's that. And then I guess I would say that the nice thing about modern buildings is that maybe it's a little easier to move electrons around than water or other resources maybe. But that's a chief advantage of the energy management system, that especially if you start connecting multiple buildings together and you can start sharing resources. Maybe there's storage here, maybe there's PV here. And when you do that, typically you actually have a better solution, a more efficient solution for everyone when you share. So those are the types of things that can be studied in UrbanOPT.
Yeah, that's great. And that's why I think the Spur campus is such a unique opportunity for your programs is you'll be taking science there and innovating, and yet this access from the community will provide not only equitable access, but the ability to make choices, right? And to make informed choices for each of us to change our individual behaviors, if not collectively, around water or energy or food and agriculture. So I think that's a really powerful thing. I wonder if you could share, and let me encourage folks to put questions in the comments. Again, if you have any questions or comments for our speakers today, that's great. We'd love to share them. We don't see any yet, so we'll keep rolling. And maybe each of you could talk a little bit more about both the partnerships you're bringing, and you've referenced, each of you have referenced government or industry or other academics, but maybe a little more specific about the partnerships you're bringing, but also the partnerships you would hope evolve over time by being at Spur. Because one of the things for CSU system is Spur offers a Denver presence that we've never had before, access to DIA that really brings in an international community, or makes it easier for people to come and meet us and interact with us. So let's focus on partnerships across that triple helix of academia, government, and industry, and maybe share with the community who else they might see beside RAMs inside these buildings. Let's start with Jim this time.
Okay. Well, I guess just the central location. Some of the institutions in the neighborhood are obviously right. Our lab partners at NREL, but from the industry perspective, I mentioned this other project. It turns out that Excel is a progressive utility, in my opinion, for what they're trying to do. They're there just to provide power to the campus and innovative things that they're doing in order to enhance flexibility. So, and I'm looking at from the lens of an electrical engineer here, but this going back to this, ability to do applied research there. The local utility partners, I think, are important, and also some of the controls firms, energy management firms that we hope to work with, like Siemens and others. So those are mine.
Great. Mazdak? So
again, there are three things that we've immediately have kind of thought about in terms of engagement and building that innovation ecosystem. I think having a presence down in Denver is critical for us to be able to identify relationships that are not necessarily available to us, whether it's in Fort Collins or other campuses, CSU campuses. The Front Range of Colorado and the Denver area is one of the central places for particularly computational and modeling and software development for agro ecosystems and agribusiness and sustainable solutions. And I think the proximity to these companies would allow us to interact in a much more robust fashion. Jim already mentioned that Denver hosts many federal and state governmental agencies that already work with us, but this presence down in Denver will allow us to expand those relationships and interact in a much more robust fashion. And I strongly believe that having that presence down in Denver allows us to do a more rigorous recruitment of top talent, and not necessarily students, but also research professionals or software developers and things of that sort. So from that perspective, again, Spur is a very complementary location for us. It doesn't substitute our Fort Collins campus, for example, but adds a lot of complementary capacities for us that enables us to grow and hopefully get stronger as we go forward.
Thanks. Jennifer.
Yeah, thinking about this question, I think in terms of local to global and internal to external partners. Locally, we're already interacting with a whole bunch of urban agricultural groups, from a nonprofit like the Denver Botanic Gardens to a citizens group like Huerta, which is a local nonprofit right there. We also partner internally. We just launched literally last week a graduate certificate in urban agriculture to get people interested with CSU Online, to get people interested and educated in the area of urban agriculture. And all the way to globally, I just submitted a grant yesterday with a colleague in Israel about rooftop agrivoltaics and the research that we would have the same research at both locations. And of course, it would be at CSU Spur campus is where we would have that work. So we also partner a lot with industry and government. For example, roofing companies are quite interested in getting their name out by partnering at CSU Spur campus. American Hydrotech is one of them we've been talking to. And as Jim mentioned, NREL, I'm on a panel in a couple of weeks on agrivoltaics. NREL is quite interested in looking at this technology of integrating agriculture and energy generation. So there's a whole bunch of connections that would only really be possible at this urban location.
That's great. Very exciting. Question came in from the audience about, and not surprising since the audience is replete with alumni, is how can alumni get engaged with the campus and programs like yours? I know that takes many forms, but I'm curious if one of you would like to take a stab at that. I think there's a real interest from our alumni community in what's going on there. And we talk about engagement, and I think that's where the question came in, is how can they learn more, and potentially can they get involved with research at Spur?
I'll jump in on that one if that's all right, Alan. I spend a lot of time in this area of my work. So there's a number of ways, from as small as, getting educated on a citizen sciences initiative like we will have for one of my graduate student projects, and or bringing groups to Spur campus to make sure everyone's aware of the availability there, all the way up to advisory committees. I know there's a number of advisory committees already in place, including one in urban agriculture that we already have with some thought leaders in the urban ag area. So there are a large number of ways. It's literally showing up and getting involved and getting connected on social media.
Great, thanks, Jen. Any other, Mazdak or Jim, anything to add there?
Go ahead, Jim.
Go ahead, Jim.
I was gonna say that covered it pretty well.
Okay.
But if there are specific, I know that the one thing I forgot to mention is that there's a nice aerospace hub also in Denver. I didn't want to leave that out. And I know the systems engineering department, electrical mechanical engineering at CSU are very interested in engaging more. So if there were specific, say, even applied research or problems that you would want to connect with a faculty member about, maybe get engaged that way, we'd be happy to talk to you.
Yeah. And I can share that, again, I'm familiar with the CSU water students and graduates and former colleagues of ours that now lead very important organizations throughout the world and lead many, many companies, extremely successful companies. I think some of these partnership opportunities also applies to our own CSU folks, the CSU community and graduates. Obviously, that's highly welcome to be fostered and arranged. And also, I think Jen mentioned some of the CSU online efforts that we will be developing would be a very good way for continuous education, or even engaging our former graduates to teach some of these courses for us going forward. I think I'm not 100% sure what capacity at the Spur will be organizing these efforts, but I'm sure there will be a very organized effort to enable these kind of contributions.
Yeah, and the question really, I think, is an important one in the context of our alumni asking how to get engaged, because we, I think, in the CSU system talk a lot about lifelong learning, right? That when we use the word student, we tend to think, oh, an undergraduate student, but as you've heard through some of the presentations today, and maybe I'll ask you to expand on them, the question from the alumni is about how do I continue to learn more about what CSU is doing? How do I continue to learn? And I think the concept in education is definitely much more lifelong, and CSU Global as a component of the system is a great example of how CSU is a leader already in recognizing lifelong learning. But maybe each of you could talk a little bit more. I think Jennifer brought up one interaction with a school system nearby. Can you talk a little bit more in each of your areas, perhaps as our last question for the evening, about lifelong learning and what some of the opportunities you're creating or would like to create all the way from kindergarten till, I guess, our silver sneaker days?
I can jump in there, Alan, if you like.
Sure.
Because we actually have, even before COVID, we have I think a unique program in the systems department. Now we're more on the latter end of the spectrum in terms of latter stage career, but we actually have designed our curriculum to be more focused towards working professionals. We have our courses from 5 to 8 p.m. Usually on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and I would say maybe 3/4 of our students are actually working professionals. And that really creates a nice dynamic. People bring in examples from their actual jobs and things like that, and talking on projects. So if anyone is interested in continuing, please look at the CSU online program.
Yeah, those are great programs. I went to a MBA program later in life. You actually learn as much from the other students as you do from the professors. But but yeah, those are great programs. Other contributions, Jennifer?
Yeah, so the K-12 audience was going to be our primary focus this first year in our urban agriculture outreach and engagement at CSU Spur campus. And so we really hope to get a large number of students through on tours through that campus. And as part of that, actually, especially retired folks are going to fill a great role as docents in that, including the Colorado Master Gardener program. And for professionals, we're going to be bringing conferences to CSU Spur campus in all aspects of agriculture. So it seems like we sort of run the gamut on the potential interactions with CSU Spur campus, not to mention all the formal education that we've already talked about.
That's great. Mazdak.
Yeah, again, similar concepts here. We are working on a number of degree and certificate programs for continuous education regarding particularly green infrastructure systems like rain gardens and biosoils and things of that sort, with very pragmatic and practical points of view, like maintenance of these systems or some of these life cycle cost assessment components. I think these kind of certificate programs or associate degree programs are some good ways of getting engaged with our efforts going forward, because again, CSU Spur campus will provide opportunities for hands-on learning experiences as well. Again, as I mentioned, for example, for maintenance of, let's say, rain gardens, we'll have specific units that will be incorporated in the modules that we'll include in these certificate programs.
That's great. Well, I know we're winding down in our time. I wanted to thank each of you so much for your contributions tonight. It shows the passion that each of you have in representing of our faculty, not just in their own disciplines, but for sharing their knowledge and creativity with so many. And I think that's really underlying the passions you'll bring to your programs at Spur. So thanks very much for that. And, I think it's a great opportunity to see CSU research expand, both in terms of its impact what it will do down at Spur. So thanks again. I guess I'll turn it at this point back over to you, Corey, if you wanted to make some final remarks or any last minute logistics for the group.
Yeah, I don't have much to say except for thank you for everybody who came in on YouTube as well as our StreamYard program. Thank you so much for making it. If you ever want to watch this presentation over, it will be again on our YouTube station, which is the CSU Alumni Association station on YouTube. So feel free to type that in there, as well as all of the other presentations that we've done throughout the pandemic and throughout the Spur series. So with that, thank you again to our speakers for being here. Thank you, Dr. Allen, for facilitating everything. And on that note, everybody have a great night and go Rams.
Night.